There is always a door between the man who asks for power and the man who possesses it, but almost no one notices who holds the key. Most people imagine control as something visible. They picture armies crossing borders, executives signing contracts, bankers moving capital, politicians issuing commands, or kings seated beneath crowns. They assume power begins when one person finally gains authority over another. But by the time authority becomes visible, the real conquest has already happened somewhere quieter. Before the king controls the kingdom, he controls who may enter the chamber. Before the banker controls the agreement, he controls who may reach the capital. Before the merchant controls the market, he controls the road by which the goods arrive. Before a man controls a negotiation, he controls how quickly he can be summoned, how easily he can be pressured, and how much of his internal position the other side is permitted to see. The first territory of power is not land, it is the doorway. And the tragedy of ordinary men is that they leave every doorway unguarded. They give strangers access to their attention. They give employers access to their fear. They give creditors access to their future income. They give audiences access to every thought, wound, ambition, and insecurity. They give lovers access to the emotional controls of their entire identity. They give anyone with enough urgency the right to rearrange their day. Then they wonder why their lives feel crowded by invisible hands. They call themselves free because no iron chain hangs from their wrists. Yet a single message can destroy their concentration. A delayed reply can disturb their sleep. A piece of criticism can alter their decisions. A threat of withdrawal can make them abandon standards they once claimed were sacred. The prison has no walls because the prisoner carries the gate within him. Look closely at any hierarchy. The most powerful figure is rarely the person who speaks the most, explains the most, reacts the fastest, or appears in every room. It is the person others must prepare to reach. The person whose attention must be earned. The person who cannot be interrupted without consequence. The person whose agreement cannot be purchased by urgency alone. Around such a person, behavior begins to change before he says a word. Voices become more careful. Proposals become more complete. People think before they enter because they understand that the door may not open twice. This is why powerful men control access before they attempt to control anything else. They understand that what is endlessly available is eventually treated as ordinary. What can be summoned without effort is rarely respected. What explains itself without being asked loses mystery, position, and negotiating strength. But access is not only physical, it is emotional. Who can reach your anger? It is financial. Who can claim the money you have not yet earned? It is psychological. Who can create urgency inside you? It is social. Whose approval can make you betray your own standards? It is strategic. Who can see your plans before they are strong enough to survive exposure? These questions reveal more about your actual position than your title, clothing, income, audience, or public image ever could. A man may sit inside a beautiful office and still be controlled by everyone who enters it. Another man may own very little, yet remain difficult to command because his needs are few, his reactions are disciplined, his obligations are limited, and his future has not been sold through careless promises. This is the first hidden law. Control does not begin by imposing your will upon the world. It begins by deciding what the world is permitted to reach within you. A fortress is not powerful because its walls are impressive. Its power lies in the narrow gate. The walls mean nothing if every visitor is welcomed, every demand is obeyed, every messenger enters without inspection, and every secret is carried into the marketplace. The same is true of a man. His silence is a gate, his standards are a gate, his schedule is a gate, his savings are a gate. His ability to walk away is a gate. His refusal to react on command is a gate. Without these gates, intelligence becomes vulnerable, ambition becomes exploitable, and generosity becomes a resource other people learn to consume. This is how control enters a man's life. It arrives disguised as convenience, as affection, as opportunity, as urgency, as status. Alone offers him the appearance of success, while quietly claiming a portion of his tomorrow. A prestigious position offers him importance, while making his self-respect dependent on someone else's approval. A demanding relationship offers belonging, while teaching him to fear withdrawal. An audience offers recognition, while training him to expose more of himself every time attention begins to decline. Nothing appears to have been taken, yet the keys are no longer in his hands. A contract does not need to threaten a man when his survival depends upon signing it. A ruler does not need to shout when everyone outside the chamber is desperate to enter. A system does not need to imprison people when it can make them terrified of losing access to comfort, credit, attention, pleasure, or status. The most efficient chains are the ones people compete to wear. Somewhere tonight, one man is answering every demand immediately. He is buying symbols he cannot afford, defending himself to people who have already decided not to respect him, and revealing his plans to receive praise before the work is complete. He believes he is maintaining connection. In reality, he is teaching the world how cheaply his attention can be acquired. Somewhere else, another man sits before a closed ledger. His plans are not public. His reserves are growing. His emotions have settled before his decisions are made. His answer has not been rushed. To those who confuse motion with progress, he appears inactive. But when the hour of pressure arrives, only one of these men will possess the freedom to choose. The other will obey the forces to which he gave unrestricted access. Power becomes visible only after control has become invisible. Before a man commands a company, a household, a negotiation, or a room, he must establish order within the smaller kingdom that follows him everywhere. His speech, his appetite, his time, his money, his reactions, his need to be admired. If disorder rules these territories, every larger victory will eventually collapse from within. That is why access is the first principle. Whoever has unrestricted access to your attention can influence your thoughts. Whoever has unrestricted access to your emotions can influence your behavior. Whoever has unrestricted access to your money can influence your choices. Whoever has unrestricted access to your private intentions can prepare against you before you have acted. The man who does not govern these gates may still appear powerful, but appearance is not sovereignty, and the crown does not remove the chain. Sometimes it only hides it. In every hierarchy, access creates position. Consider the architecture of an old palace. The throne was never placed beside the public road. A visitor crossed gates, courtyards, chambers, guards, secretaries, and advisors before standing before the sovereign. Each threshold communicated something before the ruler spoke. Your desire to enter is greater than his need to receive you. The distance itself produced authority. Modern power often operates through the same structure. Although the stone walls have disappeared, the gates are now calendars, assistants, contracts, qualifications, capital requirements, reputations, networks, waiting lists, and the ability to delay an answer. The person at the bottom is expected to be immediately available. The person near the top decides when the conversation begins. Yet, this does not mean that artificial scarcity creates genuine importance. A weak man can hide behind a closed door and remain weak. A man with nothing of value can delay replies, refuse meetings, and act mysterious, but the performance will eventually collapse. A gate has meaning only when something valuable is being protected behind it. Access without value is isolation. Value without boundaries is exploitation. Power emerges when the two are joined. The first resource a serious man protects is his attention. Attention is the raw material from which nearly every other form of power is built. Wealth begins as concentrated thought before it becomes money. Skill begins as uninterrupted practice before it becomes authority. Reputation begins as repeated conduct before it becomes influence. A business begins as a problem studied longer than other people were willing to study it. A strong body begins as hours protected from comfort and distraction. Every interruption appears small, a notification, a request, a piece of gossip, a minor argument, a stranger's opinion, but each interruption enters the mind carrying someone else's agenda. If admitted without inspection, these visitors eventually occupy the entire court. This is why a man can spend a full day in motion and still move nothing that belongs to him. He has answered messages, attended meetings, solved other people's emergencies, reacted to headlines, and watched the lives of strangers. He was active, but he was not directing. The man who reacts to everything eventually controls nothing. This is also why silence matters. Silence is not merely the absence of speech. It is the refusal to provide unnecessary access to your internal position. In negotiation, the impatient man reveals himself before the other side has earned the information. He fills every pause because silence forces him to confront uncertainty. He explains why he needs the agreement. He reveals how quickly he wants the result. He lowers his price or increases his offer before resistance has even appeared. The disciplined man allows the pause to remain. He understands that silence places weight upon a room. It creates space in which the other person's urgency, assumptions, fears, and expectations begin to reveal themselves. A buyer says the offer will disappear by morning. The undisciplined man hears scarcity and rushes toward the contract. The strategic man asks why a good agreement cannot survive one night of inspection. An employer demands an immediate answer. The desperate man mistakes pressure for opportunity. The prepared man asks what the urgency is designed to prevent him from seeing. A relationship threatens withdrawal unless a boundary is abandoned. The frightened man negotiates against his own dignity. The sovereign man understands that affection requiring self-betrayal is not affection, it is control, using intimacy as its disguise. Silence is not magic, it is restraint, and restraint denies other people automatic entry into your decisions. The next principle is dependency. A man becomes vulnerable when his identity, lifestyle, or survival depends entirely upon forces he cannot govern. A man whose confidence depends on praise has outsourced his emotional government. A man whose lifestyle depends on permanent borrowing has outsourced his financial government. A man whose self-respect depends on a title has allowed an institution to hold the deed to his identity. He may still look powerful. The suit may be expensive. The office may be large. The name may open doors. But behind the polished image sits a frightened servant guarding privileges that can be withdrawn. Real power does not begin when a man acquires everything he desires. It begins when fewer things can command him. This is where financial discipline and psychological discipline become inseparable. Money is stored choice. A reserve does more than purchase objects. It purchases time to think. It gives a man the ability to reject an insulting offer, leave a destructive environment, survive a temporary loss, or wait for better terms. Without reserves, urgency enters every decision, and urgency is where leverage dies. A merchant with 1 day of food remaining cannot negotiate like a merchant whose warehouse is full. An employee drowning in monthly payments cannot confront unreasonable demands like a man who has prepared for uncertainty. A business owner dependent upon one client cannot enforce standards like an owner whose revenue arrives through several channels. The chain is rarely fastened around the neck. It is fastened around the monthly obligation. This is why a modest man with low expenses can possess more practical freedom than a wealthy man trapped inside an expensive identity. The wealthy man may have the larger house, but the modest man may have the stronger door. One can refuse. The other must continue performing. The next principle is timing. The weak man believes every door must be entered before it closes. The powerful man understands that some doors are designed to close quickly because the person behind them does not want the terms examined. He does not confuse a closing door with a valuable door. He asks what lies behind it. Delay becomes a form of investigation. Watch how people behave when they do not receive immediate access to your agreement. Some become more respectful. Some improve their proposal. Some reveal anger. Some increase pressure. Some attempt to make you feel guilty. Their reaction tells you whether they were offering partnership or seeking control. The man who cannot endure uncertainty will accept bad terms simply to escape the discomfort of not knowing. The man who has trained patience receives information that urgency hides. This principle governs markets, relationships, careers, and war. An army does not become strong merely because it can attack. It becomes dangerous when it can refuse battle until terrain, supply, morale, and timing favor the move. A company does not become powerful merely because it can expand. It becomes resilient when it can reject growth that would place its future in the hands of unstable capital. A man does not become respected merely because he can speak. His speech gains weight when silence remains a possible choice. The final principle is perception. People do not respond only to what you are. They respond to what your behavior teaches them about your value. When you cancel your priorities every time someone calls, you teach them that your time has no protected purpose. When you reveal every emotion immediately, you teach them that you can be steered through provocation. When you accept disrespect to preserve access to a person or opportunity, you teach them that losing them frightens you more than losing yourself. Every repeated action becomes an instruction manual. It tells the world how to handle you. Powerful men do not control perception through theatrical displays. They control it through consistency. Their yes means something because their no remains possible. Their presence carries weight because it is not scattered everywhere. Their generosity is respected because it is chosen rather than extracted. Their boundaries are trusted because they do not disappear whenever someone becomes disappointed. They do not need to announce that access is limited. The structure of their lives makes it clear. Once that structure exists, they no longer need to control every individual around them. They control the conditions under which interaction occurs. They decide what behavior enters, what demands receive attention, what risks receive money, what emotions receive action, what promises receive trust. The room may still contain rivals, uncertainty, and hidden motives, but the keys remain in their hands. In a kingdom built between black mountains and a silver river, there lived a ruler who was rarely seen. His banners hung from the towers. His seal appeared on laws governing markets, taxes, inheritance, and war. Yet he seldom entered the great hall. Petitioners crossed 3 courtyards before reaching the chamber where his advisors sat. Ambassadors waited beneath red canopies, while servants carried sealed messages through doors that never opened in public. Foreign rulers mistook the king's absence for weakness. They said he was frightened, ill, or indecisive, so they sent more demands. They wrote longer letters. They raised their voices before his ministers. But the king did not answer urgency with urgency. He read every message at night beside a single candle. He studied which ambassador became impatient, which nobleman began making promises to gain entry, and which merchant improved his offer each time the door remained closed. The longer they waited, the more they revealed. One envoy exposed the weakness of his treasury. Another admitted that his army lacked winter supplies. A third named the rival he feared most. The king had not interrogated them. He had merely denied them immediate access. When he finally entered the great hall, he spoke for less than 10 minutes. Yet every person present understood that he possessed information they had surrendered while trying to reach him. The throne had not created his authority. The distance had prepared the room to obey it. But this story contains a warning. Distance alone does not make a king. Had there been no judgment behind the closed doors, no treasury being strengthened, no map being studied, and no discipline guiding the delay, the silence would have been empty. The gate was powerful because preparation lived behind it. Far from the palace, in a trading city stained with sea salt and chimney smoke, a nobleman kept a ledger bound in black leather. He was not the richest man in the city. He held no public office. Yet merchants lowered their voices when his carriage stopped outside their homes. His ledger recorded obligations. Beside every name were dates, sums, introductions, guarantees, favors, and private promises. He knew which merchant's prosperity depended upon borrowed ships, which politician's estate rested on unpaid taxes, and which family survived only because creditors had agreed to wait. The nobleman did not threaten anyone. He did not need to. When invited to banquets, he arrived after the first toast and left before the wine loosened the tongues around him. He did not ask for loyalty. He allowed people to remember what would happen if his patience ended. One evening, a young aristocrat asked how a man without a title had become so influential. The nobleman opened the ledger and turned to a blank page. "Power," he said, "does not always belong to the man who owns the house. Sometimes it belongs to the man who decides whether the doors remain open." The aristocrat laughed. Years later, his family fortune collapsed beneath debts accumulated to preserve the appearance of wealth. He returned to the nobleman's residence and stood outside in the rain while the windows glowed above him. Only then did he understand that dependency is an invisible staircase. A man does not notice himself descending because every step feels small. One payment, one loan, one promise, one obligation accepted to avoid embarrassment, until the day he discovers that every road out of his life is owned by someone else. In another province, a craftsman worked beside a furnace from dawn until night. He believed himself free because no overseer stood behind him. He chose when to eat, when to sleep, and when to leave the workshop. But each month, a collector arrived. First came the payment for the house, then the tools, then the wedding feast purchased years earlier to impress relatives who rarely visited, then the polished carriage he had bought because wealthy men appeared to respect him when he was seen inside it. The craftsman had chosen every chain himself. Each had been presented as comfort, dignity, or progress. When his employer reduced his wages, he could not refuse. When the collector increased the interest, he could not protest. When a customer insulted him, he smiled because he needed the coin. He still called himself independent. The prison guard did not correct him. One winter evening, the craftsman passed a small cottage at the edge of the city. Inside, an older man repaired boots beneath a lamp. The room was plain. There was no polished carriage outside, no expensive wine, no gold frame on the wall. A wealthy customer entered and demanded immediate service. The old man calmly refused. The craftsman watched through the window as the customer's arrogance slowly transformed into negotiation. The old man needed less. Therefore, he could say no. That night, the craftsman realized that the cottage contained more freedom than his decorated house. The old man possessed no throne, yet he controlled the door, the price, and the terms of his labor. A man's power is not measured only by what he can acquire. It is also measured by what he can refuse without panic. Across the sea, a general faced an army twice the size of his own. His advisors urged him to attack before fear spread among the soldiers. They warned that delay would make him appear weak. The enemy commander believed the same thing. Each morning, He arranged his troops across the plain, beneath bright banners. Riders approached the general's camp, shouting insults and challenges. The general did nothing. He kept his army behind narrow passes, where numbers offered little advantage. He guarded the wells. He controlled the roads carrying food. He allowed the enemy to display its strength under the sun, while its horses consumed grain and its soldiers consumed patience. Days became weeks. The enemy commander, desperate to force a battle, began dividing his army. Units were sent searching for water and supplies. Arguments spread between officers. Discipline weakened. Only then did the quiet general move. He did not defeat the larger army through courage alone. He controlled access to what that army required: water, movement, food, time, certainty. The battle was decided before the first sword touched. The enemy believed power meant striking first. The general understood that power often means deciding what the other side is allowed to reach. There was also a court in which every nobleman wore a mask. The masks were painted with calm smiles, though beneath them lived jealousy, hunger, fear, and ambition. Among them stood a young advisor, desperate to be accepted. He spoke freely at dinners. He revealed his opinions to appear intelligent. He confessed his doubts to appear sincere. He announced his ambitions so others would recognize his potential. The court praised his honesty. Then it used every word against him. Rivals learned which insults could provoke him. Superiors learned how little praise was required to secure his obedience. False friends learned that silence made him anxious, so they withheld reassurance until he surrendered more. The advisor believed he was building intimacy. He was distributing maps to his weak points. At the edge of the court stood an older minister whose expression was unreadable. He was courteous, but never eager. He listened more than he spoke. When insulted, he did not defend himself immediately. When praised, he did not become generous with secrets. Because the court could not read him easily, it could not move him cheaply. One night, the young advisor asked whether the older minister trusted no one. The minister looked toward a tall mirror lit by candles. "A trust is not a door that remains open," he said. "It is a key given slowly to those who have proven they will not copy it." The advisor looked around the mirrored chamber and saw, for the first time, how many people were watching him watch himself. The king controlled entry. The nobleman controlled obligation. The craftsman was controlled through dependency. The general controlled terrain and supply. The minister controlled what others were permitted to know. None of them needed to dominate every person directly. They shaped the doorway through which desire, fear, money, information, and opportunity had to pass. This is why the deepest systems of power are often mistaken for ordinary arrangements. A calendar, a loan, a waiting period, a password, a signature, a silence, a ledger beneath candlelight. The object appears harmless. The terms surrounding access determine who obeys. The hidden law of access becomes useful only when it leaves the palace, the battlefield, and the candlelit chamber and enters the ordinary hours of modern life. Power is not tested when everything is calm. It is tested when a message provokes you, when an offer pressures you, when a bill frightens you. When someone withdraws affection to force compliance, when an opportunity demands an immediate answer, when your pride urges you to purchase something you cannot afford, so people you barely know will assume you possess more than you do. These moments appear small, but they are the gates through which control enters. To apply this principle without becoming manipulative, you must understand one distinction. Controlling access is not about making other people anxious. It is about preventing anxiety from making your decisions for you. The insecure man withholds attention to punish. The disciplined man protects attention so he can think. The manipulator disappears to create dependence. The strategic man steps back when a conversation becomes emotional, dishonest, or destructive. One uses silence as a weapon against others. The other uses silence as armor against his own impulsiveness. The first gate is your reaction. Imagine receiving a message accusing you of something unfair. Your heart accelerates. Your mind begins preparing a defense. You feel the urge to answer immediately, so the other person will not believe the accusation. This urge is not always a desire for truth. Often, it is a desire to escape discomfort. The undisciplined man replies, while his emotions are still writing the message. He explains too much, reveals private details, contradicts himself, and gives the accusation more importance than it originally possessed. The disciplined man does not confuse an immediate answer with a strong answer. He separates insult from information. He decides whether the situation requires correction, evidence, a boundary, or no response at all. He may speak, but he does not surrender the timing of his speech to the person attempting to provoke him. Every uncontrolled reaction gives away information. Anger reveals where pressure can be applied. Desperation reveals what you fear losing. Excessive explanation reveals that you believe permission is required. Public defensiveness reveals that your internal position can be altered by outside judgment. This does not mean becoming emotionally unreadable inside every relationship. Intimacy requires honesty. Trust requires vulnerability, but vulnerability should be offered in safe rooms. It should not be extracted in hostile ones. The next gate is speech. Many plans die because they are exposed before they are strong enough to survive attention. The man announces the business before the first customer exists. He describes the book before the first chapter is finished. He tells everyone about the new discipline before completing a single month. Then praise arrives. He receives the emotional reward of achievement without paying the price of completion. Opinions enter, doubt enters, comparison enters, expectation enters. Now he is no longer building the work. He is managing the image of the work. Strategic silence means allowing thought to become structure before turning structure into announcement. A seed does not become stronger because it is repeatedly dug from the ground and shown to the crowd. Protect the early stage. Let the work become evidence. In professional life, access is often surrendered through constant availability. A capable employee becomes the person who answers after hours, repairs unfinished work, accepts every urgent assignment, and solves problems others avoid. At first, he is praised. Then usefulness becomes expectation. The favor becomes the standard. His time is no longer requested. It is assumed. This is how a man can become essential to a system while remaining powerless within it. He carries more weight, but gains no influence over the direction of the structure. Imagine a manager contacting him late every evening because he always replies. The employee tells himself that immediate availability proves commitment. But what has he actually taught the organization? He has taught it that his private time has no protected purpose. The answer is not to become lazy or unhelpful. It is to connect access with responsibility, priority, and consequence. Before accepting a demand, ask what must be delayed to make room for it. Ask whether the task belongs to you. Ask whether the urgency is real or merely the result of someone else's poor preparation. Ask whether the person requesting your time understands its cost. A boundary is not merely a refusal. It is a declaration that your resources already serve a purpose. The deepest practical application lies in money. Money controls access to choices. When governed carefully, it creates time, mobility, and distance from desperation. When governed emotionally, it becomes a golden chain connecting tomorrow's labor to yesterday's impulse. Consider a man who earns a respectable income but has built a life that consumes nearly all of it. The car payment signals success. The apartment confirms status. The subscriptions, memberships, devices, clothing, and social routines preserve the image. Then the workplace becomes intolerable. His manager humiliates him. His health declines. A better opportunity appears, but requires several months of uncertainty. He cannot move, not because the door is locked from the outside, because his obligations stand in front of it. He has income, but he does not have choice. This is why wealth alone does not guarantee freedom. A wealthy man can be imprisoned by an expensive identity. He may possess more, yet fear losing more. He continues earning not to build strength, but to maintain a performance from which he can no longer escape. The crucial question is not only how much money enters your hands, it is how much choice remains after it leaves them. Every unnecessary fixed obligation narrows the gate. Every debt accepted to impress other people gives future income a master. Every emotional purchase exchanges lasting flexibility for temporary relief. Every increase in status spending raises the price of saying no. Financial discipline is not merely accounting, it is psychological warfare against appetite. The world will offer symbols faster than it offers substance. Credit can place the costume of wealth upon a man whose future remains controlled by monthly demands. The strategic man learns to separate price from cost. The price is written on the contract. The cost may be the job he cannot leave, the risk he cannot take, the insult he must tolerate, the years of labor already promised, the peace he must sacrifice to preserve an object purchased for appearance. A reserve changes the atmosphere of decision-making. It does not make a man invulnerable. It creates distance between pressure and surrender. A reserve allows him to study a contract rather than signing from fear. It allows him to search for better work rather than accepting the first escape. It allows him to survive a broken machine, a lost client, or a medical expense without turning one emergency into years of repayment. In strategic terms, savings are stored patience. The exact amount will differ from one life to another. The principle does not. Build distance between yourself and desperation. Reduce obligations. that exist mainly to maintain appearance. Understand the terms of what you borrow. Avoid turning temporary pleasure into permanent pressure. Develop skills that prevent one employer, client, platform, or industry from becoming the only gatekeeper to your income. A consultant whose entire business depends upon one client does not possess a client. The client possesses him. A creator whose identity depends upon one platform does not fully control an audience. The platform controls the road between them. An employee whose abilities are useful in only one organization does not possess career security. He possesses permission that may later be withdrawn. Diversification is not merely a financial concept. It is the reduction of dependency. Power also grows through quiet financial acts no one celebrates. A purchase delayed, a subscription ended, a contract read carefully, a percentage set aside before desire begins negotiating, a debt faced honestly rather than ignored, a skill practiced after work while no audience is watching. These actions appear ordinary, but power has always grown first, in places where applause cannot reach it. Attention must be governed with the same seriousness. Modern life has transformed access to the mind into a market. Every notification, platform, headline, argument, and advertisement competes for entry. The price is rarely paid in money. It is paid in fractured thought, emotional exhaustion, and hours that leave no evidence of what they built. A man may guard his bank account carefully while allowing strangers to empty his concentration. He has protected the vault and abandoned the kingdom. The first hour of the morning is a gate. If the first thing you receive is outrage, comparison, demands, and the lives of strangers, then someone else has established the emotional climate in which your day will operate. The final hour of the night is another gate. If it belongs to stimulation, conflict, and endless information, then the world enters your sleep, carrying unfinished arguments. Not every message deserves immediate entry. Not every headline deserves emotion. Not every online conflict offers a meaningful victory. Before responding, ask what the response will build. Before arguing, ask what winning would actually produce. Before continuing to scroll, ask who benefits from the next hour of your attention. Relationships require the same discernment. Do not use absence to manufacture attraction. Do not ration kindness to create obedience. Do not become cold and call it strength, but stop rewarding repeated disrespect with greater access. When a person continually violates your time, trust, or dignity, explanation alone rarely changes the pattern. Reduced access may communicate what words have failed to establish. The boundary should be calm, proportional, consistent. Its purpose is to protect order, not satisfy revenge. The powerful man does not need to make a spectacle of leaving. He stops giving premium access to behavior that has not earned it. This principle transforms negotiation as well. Never enter an important conversation knowing only what you hope to gain. Know what you can refuse. Know what alternatives remain. Know which terms are essential and which are merely desirable. Know what happens if no agreement is reached. The person with no alternative is already negotiating from inside a locked room. Patience becomes leverage only when supported by preparation. Silence without knowledge is emptiness. Delay without options is avoidance. Refusal without discipline is pride. True strategic control is built before the moment of pressure. It is built in the savings account, the practiced skill, the documented agreement, the diversified income, the protected reputation, the calm routine, the willingness to endure temporary discomfort rather than purchase immediate relief at any cost. Every day, you perform small acts that either strengthen or weaken the gate. Each time you post for validation, react to provocation, borrow for appearance, reveal a plan for applause, chase someone who has withdrawn respect, or agree because silence feels uncomfortable, you make access cheaper. Each time you pause, prepare, save, study, finish, refuse, and allow other people to misunderstand you temporarily, you recover a key. Eventually, the change becomes visible, not because you announce that you have become powerful. People notice because urgency no longer moves you so easily. Praise no longer purchases so much of you. Fear no longer signs your contracts. Your schedule has structure. Your words have weight. Your yes is no longer automatic. Therefore, it becomes valuable. The objective is not to control everyone who approaches your life. It is to ensure that they cannot control you simply because they know which door to knock on. There comes a moment when a man must stop asking who controls his life and begin examining the doors he left unguarded. Not the visible doors, the invisible ones. The door through which fear enters his decisions. The door through which debt claims his future. The door through which praise purchases his loyalty. The door through which anger reaches his mouth before judgment reaches his mind. The door through which comparison transforms another person's life into a command. Most people search for power in the wrong direction. They look outward. They believe strength will arrive with a larger income, a more impressive title, a more obedient circle, or a seat closer to the throne. They assume control begins when others finally listen. But a man may command a room while obeying every insecurity within him. He may possess wealth and remain a servant to appearance. He may receive attention and remain terrified of being forgotten. He may hold authority and still be unable to refuse the people who know how to flatter, provoke, or frighten him. The crown does not remove the chain. Sometimes it only covers it. The deepest lesson is not that you must become distant, cold, or unreachable. It is that access to you must no longer be governed by impulse. Your attention should not belong to the loudest voice. Your money should not belong to the strongest appetite. Your emotions should not belong to the most skilled provocateur. Your future should not belong to obligations accepted merely because you feared disappointing someone in the present. You must decide what enters. You must decide what remains. You must decide what no longer receives a key. This is where power becomes real. It begins when silence is no longer an emptiness you rush to fill. It becomes a chamber in which motives reveal themselves. It begins when patience is no longer mistaken for weakness. It becomes the refusal to move merely because another person has manufactured urgency. It begins when saving money is no longer viewed as deprivation. It becomes the construction of distance between pressure and surrender. It begins when a boundary is no longer delivered as an apology. It becomes the architecture of self-respect. Look carefully at your life. Who can disturb your peace with one message? Who can make you betray your schedule by expressing disappointment? Who can draw private information from you with a small amount of praise? What purchase are you still paying for because you wanted strangers to see a version of you that had not yet been built? What environment do you remain inside because your obligations have made departure feel impossible? What relationship survives only because you fear the silence that would follow its end? These are not merely emotional questions, they are strategic questions. Every answer reveals a point of entry. Somewhere in your life, an invisible contract may already exist. It may never have been written or signed, but its terms are clear. You will continue providing time in exchange for approval. You will continue tolerating disrespect in exchange for belonging. You will continue performing success in exchange for admiration. You will continue sacrificing tomorrow to protect the appearance of today. The most dangerous contracts are the ones we do not realize we accepted, but an invisible contract can still be broken, not through drama, not through revenge, not through a public performance designed to prove that you have changed. It is broken through a new pattern. You stop answering every demand immediately. You stop explaining decisions to people who are not responsible for their consequences. You stop purchasing status with borrowed peace. You stop revealing plans before discipline has made them real. You stop allowing loneliness to negotiate your standards. You stop calling every closed door a loss. At first, people who benefited from your lack of boundaries may describe your restraint as arrogance. Those who were comfortable with your constant availability may accuse you of changing. Those who knew how to provoke you may intensify their efforts when the old methods stop producing results. This is the moment when many men return the key. They mistake resistance for evidence that the boundary is wrong, but resistance often means the boundary has finally reached the place where it is needed. Remain calm. You do not need to punish anyone. You do not need to prove how little you care. Indifference performed for an audience is still dependence upon the audience. Maintain the structure. Let your actions become quieter and your standards clearer. Let your money move towards stability rather than display. Let your speech become deliberate. Let your private work become stronger than your public image. Let your reputation be built through promises kept rather than authority claimed. Over time, the shape of your life will change. Fewer people will be able to create false emergencies around you. Fewer purchases will seduce you with borrowed identity. Fewer insults will force you into performance. Fewer opportunities will trap you by appearing to be your only option. The world will not become less demanding. You will become less available to demands that do not serve a worthy purpose. That is the difference. A powerful man is not a man who controls every room. He is a man who can enter a room without surrendering control of himself. He can listen without absorbing every opinion. He can negotiate without worshipping the outcome. He can love without abandoning his dignity. He can earn without becoming owned by what he earns. He can walk away without needing to destroy what he leaves behind. His power is not loud because it does not require witnesses. It can be seen in the contract he refuses, the argument he does not enter, the purchase he delays, the secret he protects, the promise he keeps, the hour he guards from interruption. These actions appear ordinary. Together, they form a throne no one can easily remove. The world will always contain hidden hands. Institutions will compete for your labor. Markets will compete for your money. Platforms will compete for your attention. People will compete for your emotional reaction. Some will offer opportunity. Some will offer golden chains. Your task is not to reject everything. Your task is to recognize the difference. Open the gate for trust, truth, meaningful work, disciplined risk, honest partnership, and responsibilities worthy of your strength. Close it to manipulation, vanity, manufactured urgency, careless debt, repeated disrespect, and the endless hunger to be seen. You do not need to control the entire board. You need to stop allowing every piece to move you. The silent king does not chase the crowd outside the palace. He tends the kingdom within the walls. He strengthens the treasury. He studies the map. He decides which messengers may enter and which demands will remain unanswered beneath the rain. When he finally moves, the movement carries weight because it was not wasted. That is the final law. Before you seek more influence, control access to your attention. Before you seek more money, control access to your appetite. Before you seek more respect, control access to your dignity. Before you seek authority over anything outside you, reclaim authority over the gates within you, because the man who holds those keys may still lose a negotiation. He may lose an opportunity. He may lose a relationship. He may lose a season of comfort, but he will not lose himself. Now ask yourself one question. Which gate in your life has been left unguarded? Your time, your money, your attention, your emotions, or your dignity? Name it in the comments, not to confess weakness, but to identify the territory you are ready to reclaim. And if you are building a life that cannot be controlled through fear, vanity, urgency, or dependence, subscribe. The next lesson will reveal why powerful men protect their alternatives before they reveal their intentions. Real power begins when the world can no longer enter you without permission.